Having raised the spectre of Mrs. Thatcher in the Sunday Telegraph last week, Keir Starmer tried to dampen the nerves of the Labour Party by saying that she did terrible things in Glasgow. And this was after, it was the same day, I think, he was caught by a crowd in Glasgow and challenged on the train up to Glasgow. So I think really saying that she did huge damage, having used her to grab headlines, it doesn't really wash, does it? He'd said in the Sunday Telegraph article that she'd dragged Britain out of its stupor by letting loose our natural entrepreneurism, and then he was mocked in the House of Commons during PMQs for being a fanboy of Mrs. Thatcher. And he said in Scotland that he definitely wasn't a fanboy. Well, you don't have that much space in an article to say things which are utterly irrelevant. She did terrible things, particularly here in Scotland, which everybody in this room, including myself, profoundly disagrees with. Well, that should come into the article that he initially penned in the Sunday Telegraph, to put the two things together. The fact that she was an extraordinary example of political power, the fact that she was an extraordinarily hard worker, the fact that she tugged Britain out of the doldrums, and the fact that she was also divisive and did things which promoted division, and both the things that she did that were good and the things that she did were bad have been long-lasting. And I'm always mindful of the fact that the Labour Party, when it got into power under Tony Blair, did not change her union legislation, her attempt to rein back the power of the unions, because presumably it was convenient. And although Clause 28 was something that came in at the end of her time, it was John Major, not the Labour Party, that changed that. So I think the most divisive thing, I think, was to signal the value of making money over anything else and over other people, and I think that has continued. But that contempt for other people, maybe it was a time of a sign of the age. It was not specifically something that was Thatcherite, because it's been embraced by politicians of all creeds and by people who are not politicians as well. We live in an age where people don't listen. Now, if that was the worst we can say about Mrs. Thatcher, and I think that probably is the worst we can say about her, I think she was I don't think she was responsible for bringing that in. I think she was one of the first notable examples of somebody who seemed not to listen. In fact, I think Mrs. Thatcher personally listened very hard, but she embraced the image of inflexibility, and she promoted that image foolishly. I think that inflexibility went with authority. And I don't think that's how she was. I think that's what she projected, and I think that was wrong. I think that was a foolishness, and I think it gave license to bullies from the 1980s onwards. And they still exist in all walks of life, in Ofsted, in schools, in universities, in business, and certainly in politics. And I note that Ruth Perry's sister has pointed out that Ofsted still haven't apologised. Of course they haven't. They don't know how to.